When my boss fired me, he smiled. Not a nervous smile, not the kind of smile someone gives when they know they're doing something wrong. No, it was the smile of a man who thought he had already won. He leaned back in his leather chair, folded his hands over his stomach, and said, "Don't take it personally, Daniel. You're just not a fit for this company anymore." Not a fit. That's what he called it. After 4 years of 12-hour days, weekends in the office, and solving disasters that weren't even my responsibility, I was suddenly not a fit. I sat there in silence, trying to process what was happening. My name was already removed from the team dashboard on the TV behind him. My email had been cut off. My keycard was disabled before I even walked into the meeting. That meant this wasn't a decision. It was an execution. And the worst part, 3 days earlier, he had congratulated me in front of the entire company for helping land the biggest client in our firm's history. That client was worth almost $8 million over 2 years. I was the one who built the proposal. I was the one who stayed up until 2 a.m., rewriting the numbers after finance made mistakes. I was the one who found the compliance issue hidden in the contract and fixed it before it could blow up the whole deal. And now, suddenly, I was being thrown out like office trash. I looked at my boss, Greg Holloway, founder and CEO of Holloway Strategic Solutions, and asked the only question that mattered. Why now? He shrugged. We're restructuring. That was a lie. I knew it was a lie because companies that are restructuring don't give the CEO a brand new Porsche and remodel the executive floor. Then he slid an envelope across the desk. 2 weeks severance, a non-disparagement agreement, and a clause that said I couldn't pursue legal action. That was when I knew something bigger was going on. You don't ask someone to sign away their rights unless you're afraid of what they know. I didn't sign. Greg's smile faded for half a second. Then he said, "If you're smart, Daniel, you'll take the money and move on." I remember standing up, taking the envelope and saying, "If I were smart, Greg, I'd ask what exactly you're so scared I might find." He didn't answer. He just pressed the intercom and asked security to escort me out. That should have been the end of it. But Greg made one mistake. Actually, he made 3. First, he fired me the same week he promoted his nephew, Tyler, into a role Tyler was wildly unqualified for. Second, he did it right after stealing credit for the biggest account of my career. And third, he forgot I was the one who built half the systems that kept his company running. Now let me be clear, I didn't hack anything. I didn't sabotage anything. I didn't break into a database wearing a hoodie in some parking garage. Everything I did was legal. Painfully legal. And that's what made it so satisfying. The first thing I did after getting fired was go home, sit at my kitchen table, and open my personal notebook. They took that. My notebook. For 4 years, I had written down everything. Project timelines, verbal approvals, budget changes, vendor complaints, weird conversations after meetings, instructions Greg gave off the record. I started doing it because Greg had a habit of denying things he absolutely said. If he told you to do something shady, then later it blew up, he'd swear you misunderstood him. So I documented everything. At the time, it felt paranoid. That notebook would become the knife that cut his empire open. At first, I thought maybe he fired me to avoid paying my annual bonus. That alone would have made him a greedy snake, but not enough to destroy a company. Then I got a call from Monica in accounting. Monica and I were never close, but she was one of the few people in that building who still had a conscience. She called from a blocked number. Her first sentence was, "Don't say my name if anyone asks." That got my attention. Then she told me Greg had announced my termination internally as a performance issue. A performance issue. Apparently, I had been inconsistent, difficult to manage, and unable to meet expectations. That man had praised me in public on Monday and called me incompetent by Friday. But Monica had more. She said Tyler, Greg's nephew, was now handling the new $8 million client account, which made no sense. because Tyler couldn't handle a Starbucks order without sweating through his shirt. Then Monica lowered her voice and said, "Daniel, I think Greg fired you because you were asking too many questions about billing." And suddenly everything clicked. 3 months earlier, I had noticed strange invoice patterns on 2 major accounts. Small overcharges, duplicated consulting hours, travel expenses billed for meetings that happened on Zoom. Just enough to slip past busy clients. When I asked Greg about it, he laughed and said, "That's how enterprise billing works." I knew that was nonsense, but he brushed me off, and I was too busy putting out fires to keep digging. Now I understood. I wasn't fired because I was weak. I was fired because I was close. That night, I called an employment attorney. Not because I wanted revenge. At least that's what I told myself. I told her I wanted to know if my firing was legal. Her name was Rebecca Sloan, and within 10 minutes, she said the sentence that changed everything. "Daniel, if they terminated you in retaliation for raising billing concerns, and they're defaming your performance internally, you may have a much bigger case than wrongful termination." I asked, "How big?" She said, "Big enough that you do not contact them directly again. Big enough that from this moment on, you save everything." So I did. Over the next 2 weeks, the truth came to me piece by piece. Former coworkers started reaching out quietly. Not because they were brave, because Greg had turned on them too. One had been pressured to alter timesheets. Another had seen Tyler approve expenses for a client dinner that was actually a Vegas trip. A project manager told me Greg routinely promised deliverables that were impossible, then blamed staff when deadlines collapsed. A compliance analyst sent me screenshots showing changes made to documentation after client approval, changes that increased billable work without proper authorization. Every story alone was suspicious. Together they formed a pattern: fraud, nepotism, retaliation, misrepresentation. And Greg had wrapped it all in expensive suits and corporate buzzwords. Rebecca told me to stop thinking like a fired employee and start thinking like a witness. So that's what I became. We filed a formal complaint with the State Labor Board over retaliation and defamation. Then Rebecca connected me with a forensic accountant. That was the point where this stopped being personal and started becoming catastrophic. Because once someone who understands numbers starts looking at dishonest books, the lies don't stay hidden for long. The forensic accountant found that Holloway Strategic Solutions had been inflating hours across multiple contracts, charging clients for senior-level review that never happened, and shifting internal administrative costs into billable client expenses. Legally, that's not creative accounting. That's fraud. Still, we needed proof strong enough that Greg couldn't charm his way out of it. And Greg was charming. That was his real talent. Not leadership, not strategy, charm. He was the kind of man who could underpay you, insult you, and somehow leave you feeling guilty for being upset. Men like Greg survive because people confuse confidence with competence. But charm doesn't hold up under subpoenas. And Greg made another mistake. He retaliated again. A recruiter I had been interviewing with called and awkwardly told me they were moving in another direction. I asked why. Long pause. Then he admitted someone from Holloway Strategic had contacted them and warned them that I had integrity issues. There it was. Greg wasn't just firing me. He was trying to bury me. Rebecca nearly smiled when I told her. "Good," she said. I stared at her. "Good?" I asked. "Because now he's making the case easier." That's the thing about arrogant people. When they think you're powerless, they get sloppy. We amended the complaint, added tortious interference, added retaliatory misconduct. And then one of the clients called me directly. Not Greg, not legal, the client. He said, "Daniel, off the record, I need to ask you something. Were you aware of billing irregularities on our account?" I didn't answer right away. Rebecca had prepared me for this. So I said, "I'm currently involved in a legal matter and can't comment casually. But I strongly suggest your legal team conduct a full audit of all invoices submitted in the last 12 months. He went quiet. Then he said, "That's what I was afraid of." Once one client started pulling threads, the whole sweater unraveled. Audits began. Invoices were reviewed. Email chains were requested. Approval logs were compared. And the beautiful thing about corporate fraud is that it leaves paperwork. A lot of paperwork. Within a month, 2 major clients froze payments pending investigation. That alone put Greg's company under pressure. He had built the business on appearances, luxury office, aggressive expansion, expensive branding, but underneath it all, cash flow was tighter than anyone realized. When those payments stopped, panic started. People inside the company began protecting themselves. Compliance forwarded internal concerns to outside counsel. Accounting started documenting who approved what. HR suddenly pretended they cared about procedure. And Tyler? Tyler folded instantly. See, men like Greg love hiring loyal idiots, because loyal idiots don't ask questions. The problem is, when investigators show up, loyal idiots talk. A lot. Tyler admitted he had signed off on things Greg instructed him to approve. He handed over messages, expense reports, Slack logs, voice notes. He practically gift-wrapped the case. And Greg, in classic Greg fashion, tried to throw Tyler under the bus, which only made Tyler cooperate more. You know what the most satisfying part was? I didn't have to scream. I didn't have to threaten. I didn't have to get revenge in the dramatic movie sense. I just told the truth, with documentation, to people whose job was to care. That was enough. Eventually, Greg's attorney requested mediation. That was the first time since my firing that I saw fear in Greg's eyes. He looked older, angrier, less polished, like someone had finally forced him to exist without his stage lighting. He tried to act calm, tried to frame it as a mutual misunderstanding. He even said, "Daniel, I think this has all gotten a little out of hand." Out of hand. That's what he called the collapse of the company he poisoned. I looked at him across the conference table and said, "But all I did was keep records." He clenched his jaw. Then he said something I'll never forget. "If you had just signed the severance, none of this would have happened." And there it was, the confession hidden inside entitlement. He really believed this was my fault. That if I had accepted his payoff and disappeared quietly, he would still be out there lying, stealing, and ruining people's careers. Rebecca slid a document across the table. Not to me, to Greg. A draft complaint ready for civil filing, with supporting evidence, witness statements, and financial analysis attached. He read the first 2 pages and went pale. Because for the first time, he understood something simple. This wasn't a disgruntled employee making noise. This was a documented pattern. And patterns are hard to explain away. The mediation ended without a deal. 3 weeks later, the first lawsuit was filed. Then another. Then a client suit. Then a whistleblower complaint at the federal level, tied to one of the government-adjacent contracts they'd mishandled. That was the hit that really cracked the foundation. Banks got nervous. Vendors demanded faster payment. One board advisor resigned. Then another. The company started hemorrhaging people. They always do. The rest stayed just long enough to update their resumes. By the time the local business journal ran the headline, "Holloway Strategic under investigation for billing practices and retaliation claims," it was over. Not officially, but spiritually, financially, socially, over. Greg tried to make a public statement, blaming a former employee with personal grievances. That backfired immediately when more former employees came forward. Turns out I wasn't the only one he'd humiliated, undercut, or discarded. I was just the first one with enough evidence and enough patience to do something about it. 6 months after he fired me, Holloway Strategic Solutions announced a restructuring plan. 9 months later, they were acquired at a discount by a competitor. Not because they wanted to grow, because the carcass was cheap. Greg was removed as CEO before the acquisition finalized. His nephew disappeared from LinkedIn for almost a year. And me? I wish I could say I felt pure triumph, but honestly, what I felt first was exhaustion. Being betrayed by someone you worked for, someone you trusted enough to give your time, energy, and loyalty to, doesn't just make you angry, it makes you question yourself. You replay every conversation, every extra hour, every time you defended them when other people warned you. You wonder how much of it was real. You wonder whether they ever respected you at all. That kind of betrayal sticks. But revenge, real revenge, isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like restraint. Sometimes it looks like refusing to lie, even when lying would be easier. Sometimes it looks like sitting across from the person who tried to erase you and calmly handing the truth to people more powerful than either of you. A year after everything collapsed, I got a settlement. A good one. Confidential amount, but let's just say Greg's Porsche probably found a new owner. More importantly, my name was cleared. Multiple written statements were retracted. The performance claims disappeared. And the recruiter who turned me down, he called back after the news broke and said, "I owe you an apology." I didn't need the apology. By then, I had already started consulting independently with 2 former clients who trusted me more after seeing how I handled everything. Funny how integrity becomes visible the moment corruption loses control of the microphone. The last time I ever saw Greg was in a courthouse hallway. No crowd, no drama, no cinematic ending. He looked at me like I had taken something from him. Maybe I had, but not unfairly. I took away his ability to hide behind other people's work. He said, "You really burned the whole thing down." I looked at him and said, "No, Greg, you built it that way. I just opened a window." And that was it. No comeback, no last smile, just silence. Here's what I learned from all of it. When bad people think you're powerless, they become careless. When arrogant people think you'll stay quiet, they leave evidence everywhere. And when someone betrays you for profit, reputation, or convenience, the most dangerous thing you can do is stay calm long enough to document the truth. Because anger is temporary. But records survive. So if you're listening to this while dealing with a boss who lies, a company that manipulates, or a powerful person who thinks they can bury you, hear me clearly. Do not react before you're ready. Do not make threats you can't back up. And never interrupt your enemy while they're exposing themselves. Let them talk. Let them email. Let them approve. Let them lie in writing. Then when the time is right, hand it to the people who can turn their arrogance into evidence. That's how I got revenge. Not with violence, not with sabotage, not with some dramatic meltdown in the office lobby. I did it with patience, paper trails, and the law. He fired me for no reason, so I legally destroyed his company. And the best part?